Hello, I'm here to talk about Cyberpunk 2077 Edgerunners, which is a Netflix animated series. It's a collaboration between the Poland-based developer CD Projekt Red and Studio Trigger. Oh, the good boys of the anime world. We love their work. They're incredibly famous for Kill la Kill, which was their first series. Little Witch Academia is probably their only other show that I've ever really loved. They have done quite a number of shows at this point, and this is definitely going to be another one of the big tentpole franchises just in their legacy. And I don't think that's a controversial opinion in any way, because so far, wow, has the response to this show just been extremely positive based on everything that I've seen. The reviews, critic reviews, audience reviews on various websites. It's a big deal, and I really haven't seen much criticism at all so far, and I think a lot of people would agree that this is probably better in just about every way than the video game that it's based on. And it might seem silly to compare a show to a video game, completely different mediums, but as we know, quite a bit of controversy behind that video game. And meanwhile, here with the show, I don't see controversy. Probably one of the most overwhelmingly positive things I can say about Edgerunners as a series is that, man, the tone, the pacing, and the visuals are all in absolutely perfect harmony. It's just this one big cohesive unit. Everything is working together extremely well. I will also be talking about some of the storytelling and like world building stuff and the sci-fi elements of this sci-fi world a little bit later if I remember to, but to be honest, those aspects of the show were nowhere near as impressive to me as the way that the show moves along and just how much it gives the viewer visual. Basically every single moment that it's on, it just keeps delivering these fantastic scenes, wonderful composition. The staging of the action is so much that it's hard to even just comprehend at times. It's visual maximalism, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if you know Studio Trigger, it doesn't matter what the subject matter is that they're working on at the time. It doesn't matter what genre they happen to be working in. They're going to do some completely insane things in terms of animation, and they have a team that is 100% capable of doing that to the nine. The full series director credit, I think, went to Imaishi, co-founder, and obviously he's the big famous guy behind Kill la Kill, and of course he worked on Gurren Lagann as well. It's definitely a team effort. However, you still see those trademark bits of design that Imaishi seems to bring to the table with every single project, where especially his character designs are just so cool looking. They all have this signature look. They're very distinctive. He has a great way of like pulling from a variety of like face shapes, body types, and again, during those action sequences, that's where it just completely takes off. The skill behind the show is just immense, and it is as flashy as possible. Subtlety is just not in the vocabulary here at all. I don't think that's a word that anyone ever would have mentioned in any meeting, any production meeting on the show. Like, it's just not a thing here. It's not an ingredient that they threw into the pot. When we do move over into storytelling land and the actual narrative and the character work here, I would say that it's all very solid. I'll also say that I'm a bit of a sci-fi snob. It's a genre that has a reputation over many decades of being extremely innovative, and like this is where you get the crazy new and interesting ideas, is from sci-fi. And here, obviously it's tied to all that cyberpunk lore and the world building and all that baggage. I do feel that the show owes a debt in terms of the world building here. Like, it's really solid. It works very well. You have a strong sense of place throughout, even though you're not getting every single little tidbit of lore, and that's definitely worth admiring. However, if we're talking about like the overall premise of the show, it fits into the category of crime fiction, which is very far from my favorite in any medium. Like, whether we're talking about books, movies, video games, if the whole thing is like, oh, here are criminals and they're doing crime, 95% of the time that's not really of much interest to me. I don't care. I don't like a lot of the crime fiction that I have seen. I don't even like those true crime shows that everybody seems to love. Just not really my thing, and here, that's ultimately what this is. There's a big place. It's a typical cyberpunk city in most ways. Lore aside, it is exactly what you would expect. It's the kind of stuff established heavily in the original Blade Runner movie that we've seen iterated on many times since then. And all of that is okay. Even just the fact that, okay, we have our protagonist who's driven into a life of crime by an uncaring late capitalist world. Fine. Okay, we've seen it many times before. Whatever. It is a believable motivation. And even just the band of misfits. This is our crew of characters, and we're gonna grow to love them, and they all have wildly different personality traits and abilities. They're doing heists all the time. That's all fine. It's okay. And if that was really what the show focused on, or rather, if that was all it was bringing to the table, I probably would have gotten bored very quickly. But again, thanks to the fantastic execution, I do not care. It could have been a show about absolutely anything. It could have been set in a completely different world, but just the way that they execute the action here, the way that they execute even simple dialogue scenes, it kept me interested. I felt invested in more or less every single character that we're introduced to. But yeah, some of it is genuinely surprising. I had some incorrect guesses as to who the big bad guy was going to be, and you could argue, well, never mind, I won't really get into spoilers. But anyway, so ultimately the production execution here lifts everything else up. I did not feel the weight of, oh, this is done before, in the way that I feel that with plenty of other properties. It's very easy for me to fall into that overall sense of I'm not invested because I know exactly what's going to happen. And here, there was a risk of that happening. And I will specifically say that about, I think it's like exactly halfway through the season, there are 10 episodes total, and without spoiling anything, I will say that halfway through, you have a very clear idea of what is going to happen through, like, you know what the big plot thing is, you know what the big character development moments are going to be, and you basically know how it's going to end, with the exception of a few tiny details. That did bog it down a little bit, just because it felt like, okay, so now I have another, roughly 2.5 hours, 3 hours of waiting for that to happen. But I didn't feel that in a negative way. I felt it in the way of, like, I don't know, is it those Safdie brothers movies that everybody likes, or like we can point to plenty of other movies where for most of it you're just watching the protagonist make really bad choices, and you know they're very bad choices, but the protagonist is making them anyway, and you know there are going to be very negative consequences to the whole situation. It's kind of like that, where it can still be enjoyable even if you know more or less what the outcome is going to be, because the ride down, like the way that things progress, is just so tense. It's really meaty. You have lots of great sequences to kind of sink your teeth into along the way. That's what's happening here. I want to say just a quick couple of things about like various more specific aspects of the show, such as like music. So it's a mix of original music and licensed music. I would say the show uses quite a bit more licensed music than most shows do, or at least that was my impression while watching. And I also want to say that the music supervision here, in other words, the choice of the licensed music to use throughout the show, was kind of a mixed bag for me. I will say that it was like 75% really well done, and then plenty of other times I just thought, oh, this doesn't feel like it fits at all. Even the Franz Ferdinand song that they use for the intro sequence, like the title sequence, I don't think is a good pick, and I was happy to skip it with basically every single episode. But otherwise, yeah, some great choices here. Incredibly solid. I've been seeing a lot of that online as well, of people just like, they want to know what the music is, they want to know that OST, they want to have the playlists and everything. Fair enough, if it's a great way for people to discover music that's in a decent variety of genres, awesome. A+. I'm doing a thumbs up. There you go. So in terms of messaging, I've already talked about how it's just been an overwhelmingly positive response to the show, both in terms of the critic stuff that I've seen and definitely the audience response that I've seen so far. And here's a question: do the fans know? I don't know what the demographic is here. I don't know the range, the age range of dedicated viewers of this series, but do they know it's like a big giant anti-capitalist narrative? Do they understand that, or are they just like distracted by all the cool action stuff and they're like, oh, it was rad? I mean, it's fine if they don't, because this is actually a really nice Trojan horse way to get that messaging into more media, is to have it be not hidden necessarily, but it's definitely there if you start rewatching the show, or if you really start to analyze things. I think it's pretty unavoidable. You just come up against that messaging at some point. That's a positive from my end without getting too deep into it. I think it was fairly well done. However, I also think that was much more pronounced within the first handful of episodes of the show, because that's where we get a very clear sense of like, here is what life is like for what we assume is the majority of citizens of Night City, where they don't have a lot of money, they're not inhabiting the most privileged spaces within the society, and they are in many instances forced to do basically whatever they can to just get more money. We also get some nice bits of world building where we learn the extent to which the world is just completely hostile and cold to the average person. Like, nobody cares about you if you don't have any cash. Nobody cares about your feelings. Nobody cares about your well-being. You can die and literally nobody would notice. That is the general vibe that's given off by the first, I'll say, 2 or 3 episodes of the show. Those were probably some of my favorites, by the way, even though the actual plot points were indeed rather predictable and like really standard crime fiction kind of fare. But yeah, I'm kind of excited by the idea that there's so much enthusiasm behind the show that hopefully more and more people will indeed rewatch it, will indeed go back and analyze a lot of what it's trying to say. We could argue till the cows come home about the potential contradiction of a now incredibly wealthy game studio trying to share this kind of messaging with the world. I don't know. Seems a little dicey on that front, but it's there. The fact is it's there, and if it is reaching people, I think that's pretty cool. And hey, if you don't want to engage with that, if you don't want to engage with potential meaning and messaging behind the story itself on the surface level is incredibly entertaining. That's just a good word overall for this. It's entertaining. This is a piece of highly effective entertainment. For snobs like me, it can sometimes be very easy to write that kind of stuff off, like, oh, this isn't quote-unquote serious. No, I think this is both very entertaining and also serious. It has substance while just keeping you very interested and engaged basically through the whole thing. There might be a few moments where it just feels like a lull and you're like, I'm not really following this anymore. That's okay. It will come back for you. It'll come back and throw you on the back of the motorcycle and off you go. I don't know. Not too much else to say about it right now. If I feel like revisiting this in a future video, then I will. For the moment, if you want a recommendation, yeah, you should probably watch it if it seems like the kind of thing you'd be into. Most people into just any kind of animation, if you are a hardcore anime person, it's a resounding yes to watch the thing. I have no idea whether it will continue on into a season 2. I kind of hope not, but we'll see. We'll see what Trigger's production schedule is like. That's all for now. Thanks for stopping by.